all your school rugby, all in one place. This is Next Gen 15.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Next Gen 15 podcast. I have Dan Richards alongside me as ever. Dan, how are you getting on?
Yeah, really good, thanks, mate. It's been, an exciting half term. Kind of been reflecting on that. We'll talk about some top five teams, I know, and move on to stuff. So whilst there hasn't been a lot of rugby or as much rugby played, we've still got lots to talk about, and rugby never stops. But yeah, all good.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we're into the depths of half term and almost out the other side. It's been a busy half a term of rugby. It feels a little bit like the first proper one since kind of everything was getting spoiled by COVID, and I think we've all forgotten just how busy it gets. It's just rugby every day.
Yeah.
We're going to get stuck into loads though, but before we do that, just a reminder that we are on Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube, and you can get in touch with us on pretty much every platform at NextGen15. That's at NextGenXV. We're going to start with a bit of news. We mentioned the Spring League last week. We've got around about 12 or 13 teams showing some good interest in that, so please keep your interest coming in on that. We're hoping that by about the 4th or 5th of November we're going to be able to have everyone locked in and ready to go on that. It's looking pretty exciting. We're going to have lots of teams. Really good thing, we've had a couple of schools down that have gone, look, we've sort of seen who's in, who's not. And we're looking at sending over a development side, which is absolutely perfect. That's what we want to see, is just kids who aren't going to get the chance to play getting the chance to get out and have a bit of a run around. That's kind of the whole aim. We just want to see guys get out there on the field.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last time, and to me, a brilliant idea that you guys are putting together, and alongside Jamie at Gordon's. And again, more chance we can get to play, to grow the game. It's just fantastic. As you talked about last time, to steal your point, sevens is fantastic in that Lent term. It isn't a game for everybody. Some guys come over from other sports and love sevens and do fantastically well, but actually some boys that love rugby don't love sevens, and this may give some schools who have previously just focused on sevens the chance to get some level of a competitive game where, as you said before, like there's something on the line. It means something. It matters, but it's primarily for fun and to get guys going. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant initiative. I'm so chuffed that you've got 12 teams already, and hopefully I'm sure it'll grow. Yeah,
really looking forward to it. Another big thing that's coming out, I'm not going to get into this in too much depth because we're going to be talking about this in the next couple of weeks, but obviously the rugby school bicentenary, keep your eyes peeled for more on that. 200 years of the game at rugby school and indeed in the world. That's very cool to be able to say that. Just like, yeah, when we started, it started. I'm jealous of that. But otherwise, news-wise, it's been fairly quiet on the sort of schools end of things. I suppose we had an interesting weekend last weekend. The RFU deciding that quite rightly that they wanted to share a clip of the Wellington v Millfield game, and why not? Ben Frampton performing some absolute magic for Wellington College. Absolutely loved it. I only wish that they'd kept our logo and told everyone that it was actually our clip. The cheek of it really was my feeling on it. It's just, I get frustrated with stuff like this because, and I must actually shout out before I start ranting away. A massive shout out to the RFU community section who, through Mark Lowe and through others, actually put in a real effort on our behalf to get in touch with this kind of England rugby machine and say, oi, you can't just take stuff, put it up, and not tell anyone where it's come from. So massive shout out to them. We do really appreciate that. But England Rugby and the content team, forget the legalities of using other people's content, because it's published out there on YouTube. It's a free platform where anyone can go and do anything. You're England Rugby. You're supposed to be helping promote and share the grassroots game. What are you doing that? Why not? Why wipe someone else's logo off and pretend that it's all your own content? Why would you not just go, You know what? These guys are putting a shift in to try and help promote the schools and grassroots game. If we're going to use their content, we should make it clear that we're using their content, because actually we want that promotion to continue to happen. If you're the RFU and you steal the content or borrow the content, it's but not stolen, I suppose, it's borrowed, uncredited. If you do that, you make it less likely that we can continue to exist, because we get paid for having the content there. So if you poach the content and we don't get paid, we can't exist. And if we can't exist, that content never exists, because there's no one else playing in that space. It's so counterintuitive for them. Why is the RFU chasing votes on chasing views on grassroots stuff? They don't need to. It's a senseless thing to do, and to not even have bothered apologising or explaining or really interacting is just, well, I find it astonishing. It just infuriates me. But on a level of just not understanding is the real problem I have.
Yeah, and I wonder. I think I would hope it is that, I would admit here, that I didn't understand kind of the implications much of, because what it means in terms of to next gen until kind of took you to fully explain it. Because part of me was like, yes, it seemed a bit cheeky, if you want, that they'd taken that, but like, at least it's got out to a wider audience and more people see that clip. And as I said, like, a couple of people actually sent me that clip.
Yeah.
Posted some the next gen clip and the England Rugby one. But as you say, it's that actually understanding now. It's that bit that, next gen, it's the key model and what you guys are doing to promote the game. And as you saw from the response, I thought it was really positive, and to be fair, that the community was amazing in terms of the kind of support that you got for that. And yeah, it's really important work, shining a light on a part of the game that is fantastic, a part of the game that's a really good news story.
Yeah.
We talked about it last time, that overwhelmingly positive stories, kind of park the head injury stuff and worries about that, what's happening on the pitch. It's exciting rugby. We've talked about that a lot. So yeah, a bit disappointing. I want to believe it's naive and well-intentioned. I hope it was. It's a shame they haven't apologised, but it's disappointing. And I think, from your point of view, mate, I can understand why you were livid, because it's what you've spent years, building a company, building a fantastic company, and doing this, and then to not get a little bit of recognition from the governing body for some of your footage is, must have been a tough one to swallow. So yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, it's a frustrating one, but I think you struck upon the point that really kind of once the initial frustration had subsided was really the key point that came out of everything, which was a massive thank you to everyone that basically came out to bat on our behalf. It was, I make no exaggeration when I say I actually think that our Twitter post about it, I think maybe the most popular Twitter post we've ever put out, which says quite a lot, because without blowing our own trumpet, we've put out some fairly popular ones. So to everyone that got involved, a massive thank you for inflating our egos so much, but mainly for coming out to bat for us. It actually meant a huge amount, because when, without sort of getting over the top about it, when stuff like that happens, it does kind of just make you go, why do we keep beating our head against the wall? I've offered the RFU or England Rugby on numerous occasions, work with us. And, you then get something like that where they kind of almost work against you, and you just go, oh, geez, is it worth it? And then you get a response like that and you go, it is, because it obviously means something to a decent chunk of people. And that makes a huge difference. But equally, we still finished the conversation with, listen, England Rugby, and I say it again, we want to work with you. We are promoting the schools and grassroots game is what we're all about. It's what you should be about as a body, and we're here to work with you. If you want content, it's a hell of a lot easier and a hell of a lot cheaper to send us to go and do it than to have to go and do it yourselves. We'll work with you on it. We're very happy to. Just engage. If they engage, we can help. So that was a weird weekend, but it wasn't how I anticipated things going on. I was actually in the pub on Friday night, and I had to basically remove myself from conversation to engage with everyone. But we do massively appreciate the amount of people that came out to bat for us, because it was awesome from that perspective. So I suppose out of some bad comes some good, which is always nice. Speaking of good, Dan, England under 18s, that squad in training as well. This is the last day of training camp, in fact. Quite a big squad, quite a cool squad, but some really good players. But an interesting point that you made to me kind of before we started this, about looking at kind of the schools where people have sort of come, are attending and are in this squad from. And how there does seem to be a concentration around a lot of the schools that we would naturally talk about because of their performance on the field.
Yeah, I think, we've seen it overwhelmingly. There's a lot of ace representation, which is something that's grown, and you kind of expect that, a cliched response, and this isn't true of this squad necessarily, as being, that more of the forwards have come from ace rugby in the last 10 years, and more of the backs have come through schoolboy because the game's different. I think that's too simplistic, but there is a generalisation there. But and maybe exaggerate by the fact that Sedbergh have got 4 boys in there. But you look at there's Clifton representation, Trinity representation, Wellington representation. Schools we've talked like Denston, Berkhamsted, Kirkham Grammar. These are all schools that have been. I think Oakham have pushed our top 10, top 5 a couple of weeks. So there's. It kind of leads you to this line of thought that, well, does it matter? Which is, does it matter where you attend school for sixth form? And, a big part of me wants to believe no. And, last time we talked about Lennox and Yanwu when we were going through actually, stay where you are. Because I like that story for me of actually Lennox sort of kind of staying loyal to where he'd come through and staying with that program. It is nice, and there is that here. There's Junior Kapoku who's at Finborough side. I think we're probably going to talk about later. And we were sort of hypothesising, weren't we, before about I wonder whether Junior was kind of lent on at any point to go to an independent rugby playing school that the Sarries Academy might have links, closer links to. It's, I've kind of been on both sides of this, I guess, as a school DOR with, at my first head of rugby role, there was boys quite often going to look at other schools and you'd fight hard to keep them. And it would be frustrating that one of the things they'd say is that, well, academy coach has said I'd be better off at this place. And then you kind of had vice versa at Wellington, where people were very keen for kids, and actually for kids to attend, and in lots of ways, we've talked about misconceptions around recruitment. People would think, schools would often think we were being really active with sort of 15, 16-year-olds in terms of talking to them, but it actually wasn't happening that way. It would be more, academies might mention it, or parents might mention at a DPP session we're thinking of moving, and then they would initiate conversation. So it's an interesting one, and does it? And if you look at a lot of the teams as well, sorry, I'll stop properly on in a minute. Is most of them have had very successful first halves of term, and there's that little about is it easier to shine in a team that's going forward, in a team that's doing well? Does that mean that you suddenly you jump off the page? People like, it's nice to see some form recognised, in Cam Ellis, Kepu, in Isaac Campbell-Wu coming into side, guys we've talked about who've shone in some big schoolboy games. I guess, on the other side of that, I guess you've got Sonny Tonga-Weir, who has been in an NSB team that has struggled, but with a ridiculously tough schedule. So that would be the sort of counter argument. It doesn't matter, but overwhelmingly, a lot of those sides are going pretty well, and so it's a tough one. Selection's hard, and you can't help but spot the guys who are in the dominant side, I think, and academies get sent this footage, England coaches see this footage. there's lots of interesting questions, I think.
Yeah, because I suppose the flip side to that is, are a lot of teams good because they happen to have some very good players? I suppose school rugby is quite unique, isn't it? In that if you have one, maybe two exceptional players, it can elevate an entire team much more so than having one or two exceptional players, say even at a professional level. If I take, I don't know, whoever, Newcastle Falcons, and I drop in, Stuart Hogg at fullback and Mario Toje in the second row, I don't think they become a title-winning side. But if you put that equivalent couple of players into a struggling schoolboy side, you probably find that they start knocking right at the top end of the door. So it's always difficult to know what comes first, chicken or egg. And then once the sort of chicken house is built, all the players are going to come there because, as you say, suddenly you become the team and the school that's in vogue with an academy who goes, they go, look, it's a great system they've got over there. You'd do well if you went and joined in. Knowing what part of the puzzle gets laid first is so tricky.
No, but mate, that's a really good point. And there are, I think, I'm not claiming to have an answer here. I think it's just questions because I think last year in one of the camps there was over 20 schools represented. There was a bit of a broader, and there are some smaller independent schools. With Jack from Monkton Combe, there's the lad from the Yorkshire Academies at Heckman Wick Grammar School. So it isn't, but there's a lot of big name rugby schools there. For example, a school I'm talking about, so Thomas Richards, we haven't talked about them much. They're flying a bit under the radar. Look like they've got a proper side this year.
Yeah.
Now, is that just they're really? I've not seen them play. They could just be a really cohesive team.
You'll get a chance to see them play on the 17th at Kingsholm against Cheltenham College.
Look at that! Is it that? I didn't even know that. Look at that! It was there. So are they just really cohesive, or have they got some standouts who just maybe haven't been in the same shop window as if you're at a Sedbergh, if you're at a Trinity, if you're at a Wellington, and I guess. I've worked within this independent school system. I'm not criticising it. The guys, they work phenomenally hard. They do a great job with their players. But we've talked as well, we don't want to create self-fulfilling prophecies where you have to be at an expensive fee-paying school and try and find ways to get scholarship, bursary to make it work. We want to have strong state rugby offerings as well. And I just, yes, it's really good that there's ACE provision here. It would be nice to see, again, it would be nice, and it could be that that it's just meritocratic, and I'm sure that's exactly what the coaches would say, and they're great guys. What Tofty and JP are doing is fantastic, but if someone from Tommy's or if someone from the Judd, do you know what I mean, who are, so take the Judd, a highly academic state school as well, is there anybody who you could have invited in just to put a bit of a spotlight on, look, you can be at a really academic state school and make it through. But it's obviously that isn't the job of the England U18s, is to correct problems in the system. But when we were chatting, it just jumped off the page looking at the squad. It was something that stood out to me, that it felt like a bit of a regression to where squads were in terms of being concentrated in a few centres. There seems to have been a real move to try and step away from that, but maybe that's just, as you said, where the kids are this year. So it'd be interesting to get the coaches on, really, to talk through this stuff, because it's I think there's loads of really interesting avenues that could be gone down. It'd be interesting to get their views on. I suspect they wouldn't on a squad like this, not least because the RFU didn't release this squad. It was leaked. So I'm sure they wouldn't want to comment too much. But they do later in the year start to release their squads more publicly, and it would be interesting to talk through it, because I'm sure probably a lot of the questions that we have there would be answers to. A thing that's jumped off the page to me is Hartpury College have no one in the squad. I can't remember the last time Hartpury College didn't have a player in the squad. They're flying along in the Ace League, so what I'd love to just know what the situation there is. Maybe it's they're a very good collective, but no one's standing out. Maybe it's
maybe they're on tour. It could be, there's so many reasons that why various things can happen that kind of make you wonder. But I mean, to be fair, there are some, just looking through it, there are some schools that are probably hearing this going, hey, hang on, we've got someone there, Ladybridge, Finborough, as you mentioned, Hetmanwick, Moncton Combe. But beside those, it is very much the probably the top schools in the country this season that are being represented. Maybe, again, it's all just speculation, I suppose, but maybe a little bit of that is just in terms of what's been seen. There's a lot of, not to blow our own trumpet, but there's pretty much every player in this squad is featured on a stream. Perhaps it's simply that the footage is more available. There are so many little things that things could be down to. I think what's important to state is that every single one of these players has done a hell of a shift to get this far. I mean, it ain't easy. There's some serious players all around the country, and these boys have put in a shift. And I'll tell you what, I'm just sorry, I keep getting distracted because I keep looking at it and I keep thinking, I can't wait to see this guy in action. Josh Bellamy just excites me beyond belief. Henry Pollock is awesome. And George Timmins, who's quickly becoming my favourite player of the season, just a proper old-fashioned blindside down at Millfield. But no, it is interesting. I think it does look to me just sort of, and again, we're just skimming through it, it looks to me like there are fewer ace colleges in the squad this year, which is a new development. I used to say it's roughly about 33% of the squad would come from ace colleges. It looks to me, I haven't done the maths, but it looks to me like fewer than that, which is unusual.
Yeah, and it's maybe more guys going to school, like rugby playing schools, or more guys staying at their school. So maybe people like Junior, then let's go back to him, who maybe would have gone. Sarri's a bad example there because in terms of what's happening with Ace, but there's stuff like that. It's an interesting one around. The coach can't see everything. They're very reliant on academy input for this. Whilst Tofty and JP will get and see as much as they can, and obviously a lot of this group went to South Africa, so they're known. And you're right to say huge congratulations. And even if guys missed out at this point, keep pushing and stuff. And there are a lot. This by no means is the end of the road.
As we can see, loads changes, doesn't it? You've picked out a couple of guys like Kepu who wasn't in South Africa. Ian Davis in Millfield, scrum half. I know was right on the cusp of getting into that South Africa squad. He's now in this one. So definitely the world moves on and opportunities come. Yeah,
and it's just it would be cool to start. And I think Mark Mapletoft, the sort of the pathway coach who is keen. I think he would have a conversation about because he thinks a lot about Mark's a great guy and a great coach, and it would be to get his views on. We talk a lot around at Wellington. Is it important where you're at school? Well, it's important the level of coaching you're getting. I don't think Tofty would dispute that. The level of input you're getting, can you get it all from an academy? But I think he would probably say that it's just how it's worked. This time and next time it could be that they're all from a random bunch of schools. It's not by design. I know when they're saying that by design, there's a lot of that they're deliberately trying to make sure there's representation from like all of the schools' championship teams who are all represented in there, for example, or that they're making sure that they don't have to tick off and make sure each big school's got a player in there. That is no one saying that's the case. No. It's more about those kind of top 8 to 10 seem to all be represented, and is that again could be what you said, they're in that top 8 to 10 because they've got those standouts and it tips them over the edge ahead of other people, or is it those programs to trap people? They've got very good coaching, they've got good support, S&C, sports psych, recovery, physio in place, so they attract people. It's just an interesting conversation. Again, I'm not pretending to have an answer to it, and I think Mark would be willing to have the conversation. So we'll definitely reach out to him.
Because I think there is some yeah, there are some interesting bits on kind of all sides. You know, you look at Stowe have 2 players in the squad now. Stowe, I don't think I've had a player in an England squad for about 8 to 10 years. I could be doing them a massive disservice, but I don't think they have. But they've had 2 phenomenal players come along. I think they've come through the school to the best of my knowledge. And now they've got a couple of players in the England squad. So they're certainly, from a Stowe point of view, it's probably about a couple of players elevating them. But then from a, you know, I'm just picking them out because they've got 4 players in the squad. Someone like Sedbergh, now we know they're an incredible team. We know they're incredibly well coached. But obviously players just come to them now because particularly if you're in that sort of northern part of the country and someone goes, you show some pretty promising abilities on the rugby field, you'd immediately be going, right, I want to go to Sedbergh. Before Sedbergh have even asked, you know, you're going, right, how do I get there? I need to, you know, you're banging the door down on your parents to go, come on, let's go and visit Sedbergh. And they're going, what, sorry, where? No.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important. I think a lot of it is driven by players and families in terms of, Noxie isn't out like on touchlines at games. Like, again, we talked about Cam Redpath, who got on our team. You know, he wasn't sort of hounding Cam when he was at King's Mac saying, come over for sixth form. It was that, Cam and his family decided that the best thing for Cameron's development was to go to Sedbergh, and and they've worked really hard to develop that reputation, and so they deserve it, as as to Wellington, as to Millfield, as to all those other schools 100%. Who Clifton have got there now, so have Harrow, in terms of, so it's just there's no right or wrong. We're not trying to claim to say it's an answer or there's any sort of conspiracy. It's just an interesting thing to look at, and we're here to talk about this level of games.
The point I would always make when this kind of subject comes up, particularly on Twitter, where there's no room for an actual conversation about this sort of thing, but the point I will always make is, from a selection point of view, no one cares where people go to school. The England coaches are not sitting there going, "Oh well, he's at Sedbergh, so he should be in the squad," or he's at wherever, Bedford Modern, so he shouldn't be in the squad. They're going, "That's a good player. He should be in my squad." It may be that it's easier just because of the availability and concentration of players at certain major rugby playing schools, that just through ease players get noticed. But no one is picking a squad because they care where you went to school.
No,
they really don't. if they do, they're in the wrong job, and they're not in the wrong job. They're in the right job.
I think sometimes the level of gameplay, something that we talk about a lot, helps. And it's, if you look at, I would use Northampton School for Boys, things like that. They've had a kind of real surge of age group representation as their fixture list has got harder. Yeah. And it's, you suddenly, I was like, okay, well, as opposed to shining against the school down the road, you've just, you've run over someone from Kirkwood Grammar, and we know about them. So, and that kind of makes, for the guys who aren't at, who get the guys that kind of the lads from Ladybridge and Finborough, and that makes them more impressive. But then the Academies League can balance that out as well, which is why the Academies League was put in place, was to try and give those guys and create that level playing field, so it isn't so biased towards.
It's why it's really important that we, as we edge towards Christmas, we start getting an answer on Wasps and Worcester from that Academies League point of view, because of those guys who may get lost to the pathway if they're not out there getting a chance to play.
Because so many contracts are decided at that point. Look, some guys, and a lot of them will be in their squads. They might not have the contract yet. Most academies now wait until January, but the academy's probably decided, right? Yeah. They probably had, if you've got, not again, EAP status doesn't mean you definitively get, but if you're on that sort of track and they're having the sort of, they're giving,
statistically, you're pretty likely to.
Or you've just got more of a chance. And not winks and nudges, but they'll be aware of their kind of locks. And again, it would be inappropriate for us to name names, but we could probably all throw out a handful of guys, that kid's going to get a contract. Yeah. What there is also, though, is 10 to 15 guys who bolt through the Academies League who maybe haven't had that school platform in that, be it at an ACE college or be it at a rugby playing school, who suddenly they go, wow, his class. And an example of a player I worked with, would have been Jude Williams, because Caterham wasn't seen as like the level wasn't quite right, into which was we argued against. But then he went into the Academies League and did exactly what he'd been doing at Caterham, and then he got a shot based on that. And again, at Wasps, because he's playing for Wasps. So it's that kind of, those guys, exactly, that they do need somewhere to play, like whether it has to be in a Wasps or a Worcester shirt, or whether they can just put, whether we can just put together club, something else. You'd hope that those squads get their chance to at least get that shop window, because it also can impact not just a contract, but a scholarship at university. That's massive. You can get some money off going to university now. It can really impact chances for guys who work really hard on their rugby. So, yeah, we do, as a really good point there, mate. Yeah, in terms of we do kind of need answers fairly quickish, and I'm sure all the guys who were involved involved in those teams will want answers, and maybe they've got them, and obviously we're not.
Well, we know as much as that they're working hard to find answers. We know that much. Well, let's put it this way: it's in their own interest to get it sorted. So who doesn't act in their own interest? But it's it's going to be interesting to see how it all develops. We've having gone through all that, we're basically just going to go and do exactly the same thing ourselves, though, because we're going to pick out our top five teams from the first half term. We're going to kind of mix it up a bit, though, because we're kind of going to do two of these, aren't we? We're going to look at our kind of what we would see as the five teams that stand out the most to us, but we're also going to look at 5 state schools that have really stood out, and there'll be a fair few honourable mentions, because there have been some schools that have performed so far beyond expectations. But let's start with our. Should we do state schools first? Let's do state schools first. Let's give them a shout out first.
And I think there'll be some of the guys I think who make this top 5 are definitely kind of honourable mentions in the overall top 5. And it was, again, partly we saw, I think when we were both writing down independently our candidates, there's a lot of well-resourced schools here, and that can become a reason why you end up, and it's okay, well, let's make sure we give a shout to those guys who are working just as hard, with less, and particularly guys who are punching the way. I'm always impressed when, resource-wise, when the independent sector are turned over, and that's, so I guess to jump into kind of my first nominee, it would be the Judd. I don't think that's that controversial in terms of, if you look how they're going in the cup. But also, a great result against Tunbridge. Now, it doesn't look like a vintage Tunbridge team, but it still
stands out, and that's the sort of result that for them it stands the kind of test of history.
Exactly.
In 3-4 years' time, there'll be kids that get into that first team who go, "I remember when they beat Tunbridge." It just. Yeah, that's a local derby for them as well. It means a huge amount to the school. So I 100% agree, and I just think what a team.
I think that's a really good point about legacy as well. That these teams can, because it can create something for the future. But and they've also turned over RJS Guildford, who at the start of the season, were in our top 5 for their great win themselves. We're going well over Epsom. So Epsom, I can't speak apparently. I think Judd.
100%.
Do you want to go next, or shall I just keep floating?
No, you keep going. I'll question you if you get it wrong.
Yeah. Right, so I guess I'll go through where I landed with my top 5. So the next ones who were in, well, I've mentioned them already, with Sir Thomas Riches, a school we've not talked about much actually, and that's probably a bit of a reprimand for us. They have flown under our radar a bit, but you have a bit of an examination of results. Wins over Kings Worcester, Dean Close, over Bloxham, and a win over Sherborne in the cup. And again, another team who are flying in the cup. It's really great to see strong state representation, because we're getting towards business end pretty quickly.
In many ways, that's, to me, what the cup is for. it's about creating these sort of high exposure fixtures against sort of big independent schools that you might not normally get to play, and to to come out and be more than just swinging is really impressive.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's one of the key things that kind of makes the cup, I think, something that the school scene should look to try and keep. Like how it stays is uncertain. I guess linked to that, kind of probably the best cup story then, who was would be Finborough. You know, and a school who, you know, Judd and Sir Thomas Riches, you know, are very much part of the school's rugby scene in the UK. You know, Sir Thomas Riches, where Sam Underhill is a Tommy's.
Sam Underhill,
boy, yeah, and it's, you know, and lots more before that. And
I think the Judd had Mickey Skinner's kid.
So like they've had, whereas Finborough, you know, in a pretty congested part, you know, not a densely populated part of the world, and a fairly congested market with independent sector, they seem to have an absolutely incredible side. So, you know, their results, you know, Ipswich, you could have been pushing, you know, we've talked a lot about Ipswich, when that festival got some great results, and it turned over Ipswich. Now, we didn't see that. I don't know that I didn't see that game. No, you said, but it turned over Ipswich, turned over NSB, who again we know it.
Well, NSB who turned over Ipswich. You know that we were at that game, and it was a phenomenally high level game. So so and then and you know how they're going in the cup as well. So there's three teams there who I think not just on their cup runs, but who I think are doing fantastic jobs. So, and then, you happy with those three? I'm very happy with those three. I don't think anyone can argue with any of them. They are performing ridiculously well. All three of them.
So before I do this is kind of, I think those three were locks.
Yeah,
for me,
100%.
And then it kind of, there was probably a group of 5 or 6. I'll go to the guys who didn't quite make it. Then I haven't put an Ace College in.
I think that's fair. I think it's a different system. It's a different league, and we probably will talk about it as the season goes on. This first 7-week period of it is always a bit funny because it's really about jostling for position when they then split the league after half term, and then it
exactly. So you don't know how to. So again, you could have Hartbury, obviously. So Hartbury and Brooksby Belton unbeaten. You could argue they deserve a spot in either top 5, and I actually think you could make that case for Finborough, Judd and Tommy's as well to be in like the overall 100%. Top 5. They would be honourable mentions in that. So the next one was a bit more guys who probably actually wouldn't be in that overall top 5 conversation, but have had good years. So Skinner's. So ones who went Skinner's and Gordon's have had good starts, but just a few. Skinner's slightly faded away. I don't know whether they picked up some knocks or fatigue. It's a long old half term. But again, both schools doing great stuff, and obviously Gordon's trying to balance running an ACE program alongside running a more traditional kind of through the school program.
One of the few that really does it without mixing up their circuit. Beach and Cliff, I think, have tried it as well, but very few of the other ACE colleges try to maintain a sort of school and an ACE program. It's not an easy task, but it's good to see them doing it.
And Beach and Cliff doing a good job of it. Do you know what I mean? In terms of they've got a lot of teams, which is great. It's great to see lots of teams in state school. So 2 others who didn't were John Fisher and Wimbledon College, mainly again because neither having a fantastic term in terms of results, but I've just got so much admiration about how, if you look at their fixtures, they're hard. Like they are playing well.
Push themselves so much.
And it's hard. I think Fisher had a bit of potential to have a good year, I think, but they just got a bit of a slow start. And sometimes, like winning can become a habit, so can losing. And I think that's maybe a half term might be a nice chance to reset for that Fisher team, hopefully, because I think there's, we've seen in glimpses, haven't seen a bit of that there's some potential, the real potential in that team, and if they can get firing, and they've got a lot of good games, big fixtures to come over 2 terms because they play into the new year, that they can still go really well. But the last two I put in, I guess, linked to that strength of schedule one. I put NSB in. So this one people might shoot at in terms of, but or they haven't won all that many games. I think they'd actually have a losing record. But you just look, it's such a tough national schedule.
It's about competitiveness rather than about whether you win or lose, isn't it?
Yeah, look, there'll be loads of schools who've got better. Will go, oh, well, we've done this, and that's. I just and there'll be some who I'm not where I was looking at. So like Windsor boys that they've set up a nice little, and they're doing really well. But you just look at the level of fixture, and I just think that NSB program stronger. What they do at NSB is fantastic. It's an incredible school. So I think they make it into that, and that result over Ipswich do whilst really they've lost a couple. There's people will point to they struggled a bit against Kirkham, but then you look at the Ipswich result, and there's a few. It's been a bit topsy turvy.
Well, and let's be honest, Kirkham have turned over Clifton College. Kirkham
exactly.
Yeah, a lot of teams would struggle against Kirkham.
And we're talking about a Kirkham team that could well be again. You can lead us through your sort of overall sort of could well be in that mix. So so NSB got in, and then the last one I put in was Old Swinford Hospital. Actually, a team we talked about right at the start of the half term with a win over Monmouth, and then we got to talk, and they didn't probably quite perform as they wanted to against Clifton. Clifton again, who could well be in the sort of overall top 5 conversation when we talk about that. But that's their only loss. They've then, they bounced from that defeat to Clifton. They're going really well in the Vars. Interesting that they've chosen to put themselves in the Vars. That's something that and that's, I guess sometimes we didn't know, and what's the right thing to do. Interesting one. They look to me like a cup side, but I think if you're turning over Solihull, turn over Monmouth, but that's a conversation for another day. We praise them. They're going fantastic well. It's also really nice to see Old Swinford Hospital kind of back a bit, and I guess a lot of people, they sort of appear a bit like an independent school. So it's a state boarding school. So because it's boarding, people often assume it's a private school.
Similar to RGS High Wycombe, people just assume it's an independent.
Yeah, so that they were sort of my top 5 state schools, and again the top 3 kind of picked themselves, and the last 2 there was a bit more of a bun fight. But that's where I landed.
Oh, I think that's pretty good. The one I'd throw in there, King's Macclesfield up in the northwest.
Is that not an independent school?
I don't think it is, no. But to be fair, in a show of how unbiased we are, I very rarely check whether people pay fees or not. I just check whether they're playing well. I don't think they're independent.
I think it is.
Oh well, they're getting they've got a shout out nonetheless. Well done them.
based on their website address, which is a .co.uk. Let's double confirm. Yeah.
Oh well, bad luck, Kings Mac.
But doesn't mean they're not having a good season. Doesn't mean.
Well, that's true. That's true. But other than that, then I'm really happy with that. I think those first 3 are definitely a lock. I think NSB are also a lock. Because to me, it really isn't about are you, particularly in this particular kind of list of 5. It's not are you winning or are you losing. It's are you competing, and are you what level are you competing at? And if you're mixing it with some of the best in the country. Particularly when you consider the resource advantage that they're playing against, I think they're just phenomenal what they're doing. For me, I think I might probably lean Old Swinford Hospital. Some of those others you mentioned have been ticking along pretty nicely. I thought Skinners were on for Skinners were incredible last year, and I thought they were on for another really, really top year. As you said, wavered a little recently, but I mean, it's probably a demonstration of how well they've been playing over the course of the last couple of years. That when I say they wavered, I mean they lost to Tunbridge.
Yeah,
Like there's hardly much of a slip up, is it? But
no.
I'd hope that they kind of keep kicking on in the second half of term, because I think when we kind of come to having this kind of a chat in December, I think they could be right up there in the mix. But I think at this point in time, I probably lean towards Old Swinford Hospital. I think it's really, as you say, it's good to see them mixing it again. This is a side that right at the start of the last decade, we're getting to schools cup finals. And then a lad we're probably going to come on to talk about, Ollie Lawrence, was there, moved on to Bromsgrove, but they've had seasons where that might not have happened. He might well have stayed because the strength of the team was good enough to be competitive enough. This year, if we look at what Bromsgrove are doing, we look at what Old Swinford Hospital are doing, he might have stayed this year. They're competing at a pretty similar level this year. And for a state school in the area to be competing at that level is massive, because the competition is huge around there. There are some serious teams. You look at the sides that we've mentioned that they've beaten. Solihull, Monmouth. Monmouth are a historically great side and are a really good side this year. They're playing really well. Solihull, had some enormous results this year. For me, I think I'd round it off with NSB and Old Swinford Hospital. I think they're the two to add to Finborough, Sir Thomas Riches, and the Judd.
Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Yeah, I think that's all right. And then, I'll so the big calls now are over to you, mate. So you go. What's your top five? And then
So I found this really difficult, mainly because I've got about 10 that kind of slot in, and actually, lots of these teams are beating each other, and it kind of just shows how competitive the top end is. Probably this isn't in order. It's just teams that are coming to. We may order them, we may not. But a team that I think has to be in is Millfield. I think what they did in the last 7 days of that first half of term was very special. Going to Wellington, winning away in kind of the manner they did, under a huge amount of pressure from Wellington, who just kept coming back and coming back and coming back, and just finding a way to stick it out was impressive. And we know, you've been there, the physical toll that games like that take. To then 6 days later go to St Joseph's Festival, the most physically demanding 2 days that a schoolboy will have, and to come out on top of that as well, that to me is really very special. And it was a slowish start to the season, but by slowish I mean they lost to Clifton College and Coleg Sergar. It's not exactly too much to get worried about, is it?
No.
But so for me, Millfield are in.
I agree.
Alongside them, Sedbergh, who have probably not faced the second half of term is their more challenging half of term, but all you can ask of a team is to perform at their best as often as they can, and they've performed at their best every single time they've been asked. Probably the two signature results topped and tailed the season. Opened the season against Whitgift, very impressive victory, and tail the first half of term by heading over to Dublin to take on Blackrock College and getting that incredibly tight win over them. What more can you ask of a side? I think I was looking at their fixture list, and I think they could be on course for a very, very special season. They've probably got 2, maybe 3 staging post games, and if they get through those, we're suddenly talking about this being an absolutely vintage Sedbergh side.
That kind of that Millfield Sedbergh showdown that's going to happen in Thailand now, isn't it? Is going to be
it's going to be pretty special.
Has the potential to be a pretty cool schoolboy rugby occasion. There'll be other schools, Whitgift against Millfield, Wellington against Sedbergh. Those other schools will want to have a say in say, hang on, you're not going to have it all your own way here, and they won't have it all their own way at all.
Definitely not.
but it could build to a crescendo of kind of, but that which would be a cool thing for schoolboy rugby in a way to have that sort of a showcase. But no, I think you're right. That Blackrock result was, from an English schoolboy rugby thing, and that's probably the result of the half term.
Yeah, 100%. Particularly given the reputation that in the last 4 or 5 years Irish schools rugby has built. The Leinster have not been shy about talking about how their schools and academy system has been a huge reason why they've been so successful. They've pretty much shouted it from the rooftops. Yeah. So fair enough. When you travel over as a school, 75% of that is just mystique, really. But mystique plays an awful lot on the minds of a schoolboy rugby player. There's a reason why when you turn up for a slightly smaller school and you're facing a Sedbergh or a Wellington or someone, there's a little bit of what's going to happen here. Even if actually you're probably just as good. There is just that thing, and to conquer that away in Dublin was incredible.
I think they're definitely in, yeah. So that's two. That's two.
That's two. The next one for me that I think is a lock is Trinity. Okay. I think they had a phenomenal season last year, and the question was always, can you back that up? They've had good seasons in the past, and then not followed through the following year. This year they've really followed through, unbeaten right up until the St Joseph's Festival. On debut, then getting to the final in the St Joseph's Festival. It's not so much about individuals, but still a Trinity player, Josh Bellamy, getting the player of the tournament. Just all these little things that just say this is a school that is here and is performing at an unbelievably high level. And every time the question has been asked, they've pretty much answered it. If the worst thing that's happened so far this season is that you've got to the St Joseph's Festival final, you're doing all right. I would say.
Yeah, no, I think, you could, I had them in mind as well, maybe edging out, come to who they edged out in mind once you fix. I think we might land with the same 5. Another really strong side, but who I'd like them to is probably Burko, and that it's like, okay, your schedule isn't maybe quite as strong as your Millfield, Sedbergh's, a couple of other schools that we may come to in a minute, but a bit like you said before, you can only do what you can within that. And I think Trinity they've really stepped forward in those big moments. I think that Whitgift Cup win followed by St Joe's is probably for me what puts them into that top 5.
That was a 3 or 4 day turnaround as well.
Yeah, so I think that again, that kind of last sealed it. And again, whereas Burko would have been in this mix probably were it not for their cup result, and it's they certainly would be an honourable mention for me. They're a great side, and they'll want to prove that they should be in that mix in the second half of the term. But yeah, I think that's right, Trinity. So I agree with that. And then, right, who were your last 2?
So I'll give a couple of shout outs just before. Yeah. So Stowe and Hampton, I think both deserve massive shout outs. Yeah. Bedford Modern for me deserve a massive shout out as well. Performing on a level way beyond teams of the recent past. I also think Denstone College have been pretty impressive. Ipswich as well, Oakham, and Hampton actually deserve a huge shout out. I still think they're one of the most underrated teams around. But for me, the final 2 was sort of choice of 3. It was Clifton College, Harrow, Kirkham Grammar School, and I leaned towards, despite the fact, so Harrow I think probably get in for me. Mm-hmm. And I actually leaned towards Clifton College despite the fact that they got beaten by Kirkham Grammar, which is possibly controversial, but I've been more impressed by Clifton. I mean, it's all small margins because I've been very impressed by Kirkham as well. But Clifton have impressed me with the way they go about things. I don't want to just completely dismiss Harrow by not mentioning Harrow have been unbelievable and have done absolutely everything asked of them. Wellington College on the opening day of the season, fantastic performance there. Beating Berkhamsted in the cup as well to sort of finish off the half term. They've got an absolutely massive game against Hampton to kick off the second half of term. The Harrow doing some some unbelievably good work. So for me, they're in, and then it's Clifton or Kirkham.
Yeah, I mean, I actually landed in the, so my list was exactly the same as yours. And my kind of thought, I was also, I actually hadn't, I'd slightly forgotten about Stowe, so apologies, but it was Hampton and Kirkham were my, bar the sort, because I kind of, some of the top performing state schools in my honourable mention, that we've already mentioned. So I was like, well, why those two over why the Kirkham and Hampton miss out? Really tough. Like, I think Harrow just, again, maybe just the way they topped and tailed the half term, to kind of big result at the right time, kind of headline result, that kind of Hampton may be really unlucky to me. I think arguably Hampton the most unlucky team to miss out here, and they'll, that Hampton Harrow game will be massive. Again, I went the same way with you with Clifton over Kirkham. Look, for me, the Clifton Kirkham result was a toying cost of a game.
If it had lasted 5 minutes longer, it might have gone the other way. If it had lasted 10 minutes longer, it would probably spun back the other way as well. Yeah,
and I think the way I looked at, Clifton have played 7 games and looked really impressive and all that. Kirkham actually only played 4 times, plus the St. Joe's Festival. Didn't have a great St. Joe's Festival. Now, whether a few boys weren't available, we don't know. And in terms of, but I think it's a really, really strong Kirkham side. I would actually have put them, if we're going to do it, like I'd put Hampton as kind of the probably 6th, and then Kirkham just after that. And they're fantastic teams. But I agree with you that Harrow and Clifton at this point have just done enough to stay ahead. Now, whether we feel the same when we come to do kind of
this time next week, probably.
Yeah, exactly. When and again, because that Hampton side, I think, is when I keep mentioning saying we don't talk about them enough, and they are just Andy has got a really good group there, and he's a really good coach. And they're always really skillful sides that work really hard. Always good sort of sense of team at Hampton, I think. And when they get it right in years like and Andy, taking over now is clearly making a big impact straight away. So,
well, I think the point that's always worth making about Hampton as well is Hampton is kind of fundamentally a football school. They're a huge football program. They don't have a huge amount of access to their players, particularly after half term, because of football. It's a real sort of struggle to convince people to choose one over the other. And yet, from Zoran 10 years ago to Sean a couple of years ago to Andy now, time and time again, they find a way of putting out incredible teams who perform at an unbelievably high level. So they are very unlucky. But that sounds like we got a lock in. Clifton, Harrow, Millfield, Sedbergh and Trinity are our top 5 for the first half of term, and our top 5 state schools: the Judd, Sir Thomas Riches, Finborough, Northampton School for Boys and Old Swinford Hostel. I'll tell you what, that's a good group of 10.
Yeah.
There'll be plenty that disagree, and do let us know your top 5s on those respective options. But we're arguing about very good teams. You can't argue that they're all very, very top sides. We're going to finish off with our outside centre choice for our greatest schools 15. You can see the whole 15 on our Instagram page, but I'll run you through what the back line is so far. So at scrum half, we've got Alex Mitchell from Lymm High School. Fly half, we've got Marcus Smith from Brighton College. Inside centre, Cameron Redpath from Sedbergh. And today, we're on to the outside centre, and we've kind of teased over the course of the last 2 weeks, so it's probably going to be. But there are a lot of players to shout out. And actually, a guy I want to shout out from last week's 12 conversation that we never had was Dom Fraser at Dulwich College, who was exceptional for them at inside centre. But in terms of the outside centre, I guess before we get into who it is, Well, I'm assuming that we've both agreed on who it is, but we've not actually we've not actually had a discussion. A player I really want to talk about though, who you have a great insight into, but who probably just falls outside of the window for what we're looking at, is Elliot Daly. A phenomenal player for Whitgift, can pretty much play, particularly as a schoolboy, from 10 out. But 13 was certainly, as a youngster, was his position.
That's where he played most. Again, his first team rugby, when it eventually, well, he started on the wing, as a lot of outside backs or when they play as a fifth former. But moved then in the back-to-back cup winning sides. Played 13, and it's, I think I talked in our first one, probably the most impressive player I've been fortunate enough to work with. He was so standout. I think, and he said outside the window. And it's interesting. Had we done this from say 2010, you'd be looking at probably three of the best schoolboys in the couple of years prior to our window. Would have been Elliot, Jonathan Joseph, and Charlie Walker. That Oakham Whitgift Cup final was essentially Elliot versus Charlie, and 13's dominating, and it seemed to be less. There's been a bit of a shift to me. It feels that for a while, like 13 was a lot of teams' best player, and again, not that we're saying there's some fantastic players here, but there seems to be there's just a little bit less of that we've had.
Yeah, it's less of a concentration of talent at 13, whether that be that schools have decided that it's worth getting the hands on the ball earlier of players of that level. Yeah. I look at a guy like Will Joseph at Millfield, going phenomenally at the moment, phenomenal schoolboy player, but actually in his upper sixth year at Millfield, he played a 10 because he just needed to get his hands on the ball. So I think you do see a bit more of that now than perhaps you did with just let's get this guy the ball.
And it's again that going about Will, it's interesting. Do you? It's a coaching decision, isn't it? Like actually get them on the ball, because obviously that team had Dan John in it as well, and because you've switched them around, Dan, and then got Will into a wider channel. I mean, that is what happened with Will. I know Will would be an honourable mention, I think, within this. You look at guys. Some of the guys we mentioned in the 12 conversation, like Fraser Dingwall, could have easily,
Well, Dingwall could have got in at 10, 12, or 13. To be honest. As could Cameron, as could Redpath. He's got in. Like De Glanville was a really, you could play him in a 13 shirt. Probably the standout sort of English professional who would be Joe Marchant, but it's at Peter Simmons College. We've kind of looked at, if you were at not then one of those sort of high prestige, really high profile schools, have you kind of dragged the team with you to go and that just didn't quite happen, I think, for that Peter Simmons team. Not saying that Marchant wasn't fantastic there. I'll tell you who that makes me think of, though, in terms of a guy who dragged a team in the 13 shirt. He's a winger nowadays, but Caden Murley, when he was at Bishop Wordsworth, took them to a Schools Cup final wearing 13. He was phenomenal. He's now in the England squad, but he was an exceptional 13. I guess with him, similar to Ollie Thorley at Cheltenham College, there was always a bit of a sense that realistically you're not going to end up as a 13. But he was a phenomenon, as was Ollie Thorley. I remember Ollie Thorley making his debut for Gloucester as a schoolboy in the centres alongside Mike Tyndall, which is just kind of crazy to think about, because that must mean it was quite a long time ago, because I think of Mike Tyndall as being a long time retired.
I think Caden Murley, with that Bishops team was, I think, we're going to land on the same person, but he would, actually, I hadn't thought about Caden Murley there. I don't think I realised that he played at 13 at school. I just thought he was a winger, because he played international age group rugby.
Yeah, he played on the wing when he was playing at a high level, basically.
I don't know if I saw him for Bishop Wood, so I wasn't aware. So, but yeah, he definitely would be a recent player who'd push in terms of that, as would Ollie be. But it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, they've gone on to be wingers. Maybe the schoolboy
And
13 has changed a bit.
I'll
But
tell you what, another player that I think is likely to end up in that same category of being a schoolboy centre who's probably going to end up as a winger. Cranley's Oscar Beard. Played a lot of rugby at outside centre. I mean, England under 18 was spoiled a couple of years back. They had Lewis Hillman Cooper, Will Joseph, and Oscar Beard all as 13 options. I think Oscar's, by the look of the experience that Quins have given him, he's probably going to end up as a winger. But as a schoolboy for Cranley, unbelievable in the centres.
Yeah, and I think again another player of similar age there who I suspect we'll talk about in the back three would be Louis Liner, who could easily play 13. And probably still has the.
I remember the first time I looked at him, I thought he's obviously going to be a pro 12. I think it was that I thought he's a hard running centre, and then shows what I know.
But has kind of gone on to sort of, I think sort of nailed his colours to the mast of 15 when he was younger, and obviously now moved out to the wing because back three plays are interchangeable. There's a couple of guys this year I've really liked what I've seen from Isaac Campbell-Wu at Clifton. Be interesting to see now he's in the England squad how he pushes on. And again, I think so that's it's really good to see some good sort of centre play. But back in the game, I think I think Wellington centres have had a good half term. Both Harrison Hall and Lloyd McEwen-Peters
they've developed such a great partnership. It's amazing to watch it.
So maybe making a bit of a comeback.
I'll tell you what, a couple of Wellington old boys, just to interrupt you though, that I think deserve a bit of a mention. Sam Spink and Connor Dolan.
Sorry, that was
both had some good runs at 13.
And that's again probably should have written so Sam would be probably alongside Kane the next bit, and a genuine 13. Sam, I think hopefully has been caught up in the demise of Wasp, and hopefully we'll find just as he was has struggled with injury again, made pro debut while still at school, and has had a really the club have supported him or did support him, and he's and now he seems to be in a good place physically, and then the club's imploded. So hopefully he'll get a new club soon and get a chance to sign. He may already have one. I
certainly hope he does. I mean, it's sort of unfortunate side to talk about, but my hope would be for someone like him is that at this stage of his career, he's probably cheap enough in effect to be one of the lucky ones, I hope, and to find a space in a squad somewhere. Yeah,
well, I think I think lots of senior pros have been being offered academy contracts, haven't they? So
I think so.
Lots of controversy. So, but Sam would be, and again to push really hard, but I think kind of to come to the person I think we both agree gets it would be Ollie Lawrence from Bromsgrove. Now, he could play 12. He played 13 a lot as a schoolboy, and I think the team we've picked then outside sort of another distributor, that sort of classic, more of a second 5/8. Ollie outside Cameron Redpath would be incredibly clever. He was essentially, again, we talked about Lennox being unplayable. Ollie was the same, but probably achieved that Bromsgrove team. Moved over to Bromsgrove in a strong team that had a lot of Worcester boys in it, but they got really Ollie was the crown, he
was the absolute key cog in that machine.
And again close to being unplayable, just looked like an adult playing boys rugby. And to be fair, Sam Spink was a bit like that when in his upper 6th year at Wellington, and actually what was not in a sort of vintage Wellington first 15 that year. Obviously lots of good players in it, but he had to fight and sort of drag people, wouldn't associate kind of normally an individual dragging a Wellington team with them, but having come in again, got leadership roles, having come, we talked about that with Red, to come into a school like that at 16 and end up leading it is pretty impressive. But I think just because Ollie Lawrence was so standout, I think we're both in agreement that
I think Ollie was a schoolboy phenomenon. And I quite like the fact that now our centre partnership are both flourishing as a partnership for Bath as well, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
I want people to know that we came up with that before Bath did.
And again, his first game again is to get to a coach. Like again, it shows how well young players can go when you don't constrain them. Again, there's no way Ollie would have known all of the playbook, all of the structures in that. He just went out and played, and
he's just listening to his old England under-20s mate inside him and going, yeah, you tell me where to run and I'll catch it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you don't need systems and structures, but it was so refreshing. And a Bath side that struggled, and actually they're starting to turn things around. And that in that first week he was such a breath of fresh air. And in the set, rugby kind of needs a strong Bath. We need all clubs to be strong at the moment. So no, it is interesting. And yeah, we had sort of earmarked that before they ended up at the same club. But no, I think it was there was only one guy I was going to mention. I thought you'll have to remind me the name, that the Italian lad who was at Sedbergh last year,
Nicola Bozzo.
Yeah, Nicola Bozzo. Yeah. He was and I don't know where he is now, but I thought he was again one of the best 13s
he was brilliant
for a while. So
absolutely brilliant. And I tell you what, he also, I mean, not schoolboy, I suppose, but in the under-18 Six Nations Festival last year, playing for Italy, and he stood out every time he put the shirt on. And that was an Italy side that against some of the big teams was finding life tricky, and he was still both sides of the ball standing up really well. You're right, he's impressive. Another guy actually that I was going to mention who basically lost his place at Worcester to Ollie Lawrence was Will Butler, who was at Hereford Cathedral School. In a really good age grade performer, probably similar to some other guys we've spoken about, didn't get that much kind of sort of schoolboy recognition in terms of his actual school play, because he wasn't competing at a high enough level, I guess. But ultimately, I don't think anyone can argue with Ollie Lawrence at 13. And I'll tell you what price our backline so far appearing on a British and Irish Lions tour at some point. Mitchell Smith, Redpath Lawrence, you wouldn't mind that too much, would you? And I think these decisions are, again, I've talked to a couple of people about back three, and that is loaded. That has been, particularly because we see a lot of sevens in school breaks, so those guys get the chance to shine ball in hand, arguably a bit more than they might do in kind of senior game. And it's, we might see some of these names reappear, in terms of there's also so many we've not even touched who have been standout back three players. So there's some tough decisions to come in the next few weeks. Oh yeah, the back three is going to be almost impossible. Not least because it's so interchangeable as well. So it's going to be interesting. But Ollie Lawrence is our lock, the former Old Swinford Hostel and Bromsgrove schoolman at 13. Dan, we've somehow, despite having almost nothing to talk about this week, we've somehow managed to drag on for God knows how long. We're pros at dragging on. So we'll wrap it up there. Please do check us out on Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube, and you can get in touch with us on all socials at NextGen15. That's at NextGenXV. But until next week, Dan, stay safe. Enjoy the weekend when it comes, and relax.
Yeah, you too, mate. I look forward to catching up next week.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We're going to have plenty to get stuck into because we're going to be back on the schoolboy bandwagon with a bumper set of fixtures next weekend. I've already had a look ahead, and we're not starting slow, that's for sure. But until then, we will catch you all soon. Please do make sure to subscribe and tell everyone about us, and we will catch you next week.